She just wanted to feed her son. He was just sitting at his usual table, but their chance encounter changed everything. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The hum of low conversation drifted like smoke through the private dining room of the Carlton Club, a sanctuary tucked above the bustling streets of Manhattan. Dim sconces shed amber light against polished oak panels, and the gleam of silver cutlery reflected the flickering glow of the candlelight set on every linen-draped table. A pianist in the far corner played jazz standards in soft, easy phrases, his fingers gliding over the keys like he was trying not to disturb the air. It was Tuesday evening, always Tuesday, and the scene was precisely as it always had been. That was why Grayson Walker came. He arrived at 7 on the dot, his step soundless on the Persian rugs, nodding briefly to the maitre d', who greeted him with the kind of formal warmth reserved for long-standing members of a certain class. Grayson did not smile or linger in pleasantries. He never did. He walked straight to his table near the window, where a tall vase of white tulips stood like a barrier between him and the rest of the room. The staff had long since learned not to seat anyone nearby. This corner belonged to him, and to the absence that sat across from him. He removed his coat and folded it neatly over the back of the chair, adjusted his shirt cuffs, and took his seat. The menu remained untouched. He never read it. His order was already known: filet mignon, medium rare, with potato gratin and broccolini, followed by a glass of aged Bordeaux from the private reserve. Everything was orchestrated to arrive precisely 8 minutes after his arrival, which it did, placed silently before him by a waiter who bowed and vanished as quickly as he came. Grayson looked at the plate but didn't pick up his fork. He never did, not right away. Instead, he stared at the chair across from him, the one she used to sit in. He imagined her there sometimes. Camille, with her loose curls pinned back, her laughter like something from an old record. She used to sit with one leg folded beneath her, teasing him for always being overdressed, always a little too tightly wound for his own good. That chair had held more than a person. It had held a future. 4 years had passed since the jet went down over the Pacific, and yet, somehow, the empty chair remained heavier than any memory he carried. Grayson reached for his wineglass and turned it slowly between his fingers. The light from the candle made the dark red liquid glow. He brought it to his lips but didn't drink. The wine was fine. The food was fine. Everything in the Carlton Club was flawless, preserved in expensive silence. And yet, inside him, everything had turned hollow. He had sat in that chair every Tuesday since the accident, wearing the same watch Camille had gifted him on his 35th birthday, ordering the same meal she had once called their tradition. But tradition, he had learned, could curdle into ritual when the person who gave it meaning was no longer there. He set the glass down and closed his eyes. His assistant had once suggested he take a sabbatical. His friends, those who remained, had stopped inviting him to dinner parties or company retreats. He couldn't blame them. He had perfected the art of presence without participation. He spoke when spoken to, worked when called upon, and retreated into the thick silence of his penthouse when the day ended. Grayson had built a media empire, spoken at global summits, advised presidents. And yet, in that moment, alone with a plate of untouched food and a phantom sitting across from him, he felt like the loneliest man in the world. It was just as he reached for his napkin that he heard the voice. It came so softly, it might have been the clink of a spoon or the rustle of a napkin. But no, there it was again, barely above a whisper, but clear, directed at him. "Excuse me, sir. May I have your leftovers?" He froze, hand still midair. The voice was young, hesitant, but composed. Grayson turned his head slowly, almost afraid the spell of silence would shatter completely. Standing beside him was a woman. No, a girl, really, no more than 20. Her coat hung limp against her shoulders, the hem dark with moisture from the sleet outside. Her shoes were soaked, and in her arms, swaddled in a threadbare blanket, was a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Grayson didn't speak. He couldn't. Around them, the restaurant quieted. A fork paused mid-air. Someone whispered. A waiter stepped forward from the shadows, concern in his eyes, but Grayson raised a single hand without turning. The gesture was small but firm. Do not interfere. The girl stood her ground. She wasn't begging. Her arms held the child like a soldier carried a standard, carefully, protectively, with pride. Her face was pale. Her cheeks flushed from cold, but her eyes were steady. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm not asking for money, she added softly, just the food. For him. The baby stirred in her arms with a soft, complaining sound. His small mouth opened and closed, his tiny fingers clutching the edge of her coat. The sound broke something inside Grayson. He looked down at his plate, still untouched, and then back up at her. She hadn't moved. She didn't plead. She simply waited. He couldn't explain what made him do it. Maybe it was the directness in her voice, the way she made her request without shame. Maybe it was the baby, whose wide eyes looked not at him, but at the food. Or maybe, in the simplest of moments, Grayson had found something real, something that didn't ask for permission to exist, that simply did. He pushed the plate gently toward her. Take it, he said. The girl blinked but didn't rush. She reached into her shoulder bag and pulled out a clean cloth napkin, frayed at the edges but neatly folded. She knelt, not caring that she was on marble floors, and wrapped the food with deliberate care, as if tucking away something precious. From her pocket, she drew a plastic spoon and, still on the floor, gently scooped a bit of potato and blew on it. The baby opened his mouth instinctively. The first taste made him coo, his little fingers curling against her coat. Then he smiled, a wide, gummy grin so full of contentment that it made Grayson's throat tighten. It wasn't pity he felt. It was awe. This young woman wasn't a vagrant. She wasn't a beggar. She was a mother. And in that moment, she was given her child nourishment with more grace than anyone in the Carlton Club had ever displayed. Around them, the whispers grew, but Grayson didn't hear them. He watched as she fed the baby one bite at a time, pausing to blow gently, her fingers red from cold but steady. She never looked around. She never acknowledged the staring patrons, the judgment hanging in the air like smoke. Her world was her child, and in that moment, that child was safe and warm and full. When the baby finished, she folded the napkin carefully, packed it back into her bag, and tucked the blanket tighter around his tiny frame. She brushed his forehead with a gentle thumb, whispering something only he could hear. Then she stood and met Grayson's eyes fully. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't polite or performative. It was rooted, solid, real. She turned and walked toward the door without hurry or shame. The room parted before her, silent now. No one moved to stop her. No one dared. Grayson sat still long after the doors swung closed behind her. The candle on his table burned low. The wine glass remained full, and the seat across from him, once filled with ghosts, felt just a little less empty. "Sir," a waiter said softly, stepping forward. "Shall I bring you another plate?" Grayson didn't answer right away. He looked down at the empty spot where his food had been, then to the door. "No," he said finally. She needed it more than I ever did. Later that night, Grayson sat in his parked car across the street from the Carlton Club. The city lights shimmered against the slick pavement. The rain had slowed to a cold mist, turning everything silver. He didn't remember leaving the restaurant. He just knew he couldn't let the moment go. Then he saw her. The same girl moving quickly down the sidewalk, the baby bundled against her chest. She turned into a narrow alley and disappeared behind a chain-link gate. Grayson started the engine, then killed it again. He waited. Minutes passed. Finally, he stepped out and crossed the street. From a distance, through the cracks in the rusted lot, he saw the old sedan. She opened the back door and crawled inside. A small battery lantern blinked on. In its dim glow, Grayson watched her settle the baby on her lap, rocking gently as she hummed. "You are my sunshine," he heard faintly through the stillness. The baby gurgled and smiled again. The same smile, the mashed potato smile. Grayson stood in the mist, hands in his pockets, watching through the fogged glass. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Something small, something undeniable, something like hope. The next morning dawned in soft, muted tones, with the Manhattan skyline draped in a veil of gray mist. The streets were quieter than usual, the kind of hush that settles over a city just before the bustle takes over. Grayson Walker had not slept. He had returned to his penthouse just before dawn, shoes damp from the slick sidewalk, coat still cold from the drizzle. He'd stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows for over an hour, glass of water forgotten in his hand, watching the city wake up with a kind of quiet restlessness he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know why he couldn't forget her, the girl with the baby. There had been countless faces over the years, fundraisers, award galas, press interviews. People had cried in front of him, pitched him dreams, shaken his hand with hope in their eyes, but none of them had reached him. Not like her. She hadn't asked for help. She hadn't explained herself. She had fed her child on the floor of a five-star restaurant like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that baby's smile, small, pure, entirely unknowing, had cracked something wide open in his chest. By 7:30, he was already back in his car, dressed not in his usual suit, but in jeans and a pullover, as though formality might frighten the moment away. He drove past the Carlton Club and down the block where he'd seen her disappear the night before. The lot was still there, barely noticeable behind a rusted gate and a crumbling brick wall. He parked a short distance away and waited. The morning chill hung in the air like a warning. His fingers tapped the steering wheel, more out of tension than impatience. Then he saw movement. The sedan's back door creaked open, and she stepped out, moving carefully with the baby tucked against her chest. She looked around, adjusted the blanket over the child, then crouched beside the car to change his diaper on the seat. Her motions were practiced, efficient, gentle. The kind of care that only comes from necessity. No wasted gestures, no indulgent pauses. Grayson watched as she kissed the baby's forehead and murmured something only he could hear. Then she stood, pulled a small plastic tub from the front seat, cleaning supplies, he realized, and began walking briskly down the sidewalk, disappearing around the corner. He didn't follow immediately. Instead, he took a mental note of the car's make, the license plate, the spot. Then he drove in the opposite direction, stopping at a department store where he filled 2 large bags with essentials: diapers, wipes, formula, a soft blanket, a tiny onesie with little cartoon bears. He included a thermos and a pack of tea bags. On impulse, he added a second blanket, one large enough for her. The cashier said nothing as he paid, though her eyebrows lifted at the items and his appearance. It wasn't every day that a man like him bought baby formula in worn sneakers. By the time he returned to the lot, she was still gone. He left the bags on the hood of the car, waited with a folded note for the baby. No signature, no message beyond that. He sat in the car across the street and waited. He didn't know what he expected to feel: guilt, relief, hesitation, but what settled over him was something steadier: resolve. She returned at noon, moving briskly, her steps tired but firm. The baby was awake, wide-eyed, wrapped against her chest. She paused when she saw the bags. Her expression didn't change immediately, but Grayson saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. She approached slowly, inspected the contents, then looked around. Her gaze swept past him in the car without recognition. She hesitated, then picked up the bags and opened the car door. Grayson watched as she gently set them inside, checking each item carefully. There was no smile, no reaction, only a quiet acceptance. Over the next few days, the rhythm continued. Each morning before sunrise, Grayson delivered something new: more formula, a new pacifier, a tube of baby lotion, a clean set of bottles. He varied the drop-off time slightly, never staying long, never knocking. Sometimes, when the light in the sedan was still on, he'd sit in his car and wait until it dimmed. On the third morning, he left a small tin of ginger tea and a sealed container of chicken soup. That night, the thermos was returned to the hood, washed. Then, one afternoon, he saw her again. She was outside a local cafe, crouched near the window, scrubbing the glass with a rag. A man in an apron opened the door and handed her a half-eaten muffin and a few coins. She nodded once, took the food, and sat on the curb. She broke the muffin in half, one piece for herself, the other she mashed gently with her fingers and fed to the baby. Grayson stood across the street, unnoticed, heart tightening with every bite the child took. This was how she lived. One favor at a time, one act of grace, one clean window for half a meal. And yet there was no bitterness in her face. She didn't look broken or desperate. She looked like someone who had made peace with survival, not because it was noble, but because it was necessary. Later that evening, when she returned to the lot, he parked 2 cars away and stepped out quietly. She had just opened the car door, bags in hand, when she paused. Her shoulders tensed. She turned slowly, holding the baby close. "I'm not here to bother you," Grayson said. His voice was low, almost uncertain. "Or take anything." She didn't move, but she didn't retreat either. Her posture remained guarded, eyes alert. "I just wanted to talk." A beat of silence passed between them. Then she gave a tiny nod and leaned against the edge of the car, shifting the baby's weight slightly. "You followed me the other night." "I did," he admitted. "Why?" Grayson exhaled. "Because I couldn't forget the way your baby smiled after eating mashed potatoes." Her eyes blinked, startled, not by fear, but by the unexpectedness of the answer. She looked down at the sleeping child, then back at him. "What's his name?" "Elias," she said. He nodded slowly. "Strong name." She studied him, then, more closely. He wasn't in a suit. His coat was cheap by his standards, his shoes wet from the sidewalk. "You're not like us." He didn't argue. "No, I'm not. But I also know what it's like to lose someone, to sit across from an empty plate and feel like the world went on without you." Her eyes shifted. Something flickered there. Not trust, but something adjacent to it. "I'm Grayson." "Ida." He nodded again. "You used to be in school, didn't you?" She hesitated. "Computer science. Before everything." "And Elias's father?" She looked away. We were both students. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready to be a dad, told me to get rid of it. Grayson's jaw clenched. But I couldn't, she said simply. So I kept the pregnancy. My parents didn't agree, cut me off completely. Since then, it's just been me and him. How long have you lived in the car? Almost 2 months. He glanced at the vehicle, the cracked window, the sagging seats, the towels duct-taped over the rear glass. It wasn't a home. It wasn't even safe. I want to help, he said. She stiffened. I don't need money. I'm not offering money, he replied, reaching into his coat pocket. Just this. He handed her a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. It was a reservation confirmation, a modest motel a few blocks away, paid in full for 2 weeks. Her name was already listed at the desk. No strings, he said. No expectations, just a bed, a heater, a door that locks. She looked at the paper, then at Elias, then back at him. For the first time, she looked tired enough to say yes. Okay, she whispered. The motel wasn't glamorous. A chipped red sign hung above the office, and the clerk barely looked up from his crossword. But to Ada, it might as well have been a penthouse. She unlocked the room slowly, baby on one hip, bags slung over her shoulder. The room smelled faintly of old cleaning supplies, but the sheets were clean. The heater buzzed softly. The shower worked. She laid Elias on the bed and ran her hand over his head. It's okay, baby, she whispered. We're safe. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept stretched out on a bed, not curled in the back seat of a car. She didn't dream. She didn't need to. Grayson didn't sleep either. He lay awake in his penthouse, the lights of the city painting shadows across the ceiling. But, for once, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a pause, a breath. He rose before sunrise, packed another bag, and placed it gently outside the motel door. Formula, diapers, a small note for Elias. He left before she woke up, and he kept doing it, every day, every morning, without fail, without question. And slowly, Ada began to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything in the world was out to break her. The days passed quietly, and for a while, the world outside the motel door seemed to slow. Ada found herself moving through a rhythm she had almost forgotten, waking to the soft coos of Elias beside her, bathing him in warm water from the tap, feeding him from the formula left like clockwork every morning. The room, though modest, grew familiar. She folded his tiny clothes neatly in drawers, lined the windowsill with his plastic toys, and taped a drawing to the mirror. Just a scribble, really, but Elias had gripped the crayon so tightly she'd felt compelled to keep it. Grayson never returned to knock or linger, but each day something appeared. A small box of chamomile tea, a clean baby blanket, a second-hand picture book, always early, always quiet. The silence between them became something she respected. It wasn't avoidance, it was space. And space, for someone who had learned to live with walls closing in, felt like a kind of grace. Ada didn't ask herself why she trusted him. She didn't believe in fairy tales or rescues, but Grayson hadn't come to save her. He had simply been there, steady, present. Every gift had been for Elias. Every gesture, subtle, unobtrusive, had respected her dignity. And in a world that had offered her so little of that, it was the one thing she cherished above all else. It was on a Tuesday, just as the sun began to dip beneath the rooftops, that everything shifted. Elias had been fussy all morning, refusing his bottle, turning his face when she tried to feed him. His forehead was warm, too warm, and by late afternoon the heat had grown alarming. She stripped off his layers, soaked a towel in cool water, laid it gently over his head. She whispered, hummed, sang every lullaby she knew. Still, his eyes stayed glassy, his tiny chest rising too fast with every breath. Panic rose, thick and paralyzing. By nightfall, he wouldn't open his eyes. Clutching him tightly, Ada grabbed a bottle of formula, her phone, and her coat. The nearest hospital was 10 minutes on foot, a trek she'd memorized in case of emergency. The sidewalk blurred under her feet as she moved, every step heavier than the last. She could feel his limp weight against her chest, feel the unnatural stillness that made her heart race. When she reached the emergency room, the waiting area was full. She rushed to the front desk where a woman sat behind a plexiglass window, typing slowly with one hand and sipping coffee with the other. "He's burning up," Ada said, voice shaken. "Please, he's 8 months. He won't wake up properly." The woman didn't look up. "Do you have insurance?" "No, but—" "Then you'll have to wait," she said, already moving on to the next name on her screen. "Please," Ada begged, "just look at him." "We're full. I'm sorry." The words landed like stones. Ada stepped back, her vision blurring. Elias stirred weakly in her arms, a soundless cry escaping his lips. Outside, the air hit her like ice. She leaned against the wall of the hospital and slid to the ground, arms wrapped around her son. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. There was no one to call. No mother, no sister, no friend. She opened her messages. There was only one thread. She typed 2 words: "Help us." 6 minutes later, the roar of an engine split the silence. A black SUV pulled into the hospital driveway, tires screeching slightly on the pavement. The door flew open and Grayson was already out, coat forgotten, face tight with urgency. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait. He held out his arms and Ida passed Elias to him, trembling. Inside, he strode to the front desk, voice low but fierce. "This child has a critical fever. Treat him now. I'll cover every cost. If there's a delay of even 1 second, I'll buy this hospital and fire every last person in this room." The woman blinked, startled, and just like that, the machine roared into motion. Nurses ran forward. A stretcher was rolled out. A doctor appeared from nowhere. Elias was whisked away behind double doors, leaving Ada frozen on the floor, breathless. Grayson sat down beside her, silent. She cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears that slid down her cheeks and landed on her coat. She didn't look at him. He didn't ask her to. The waiting room was too bright. The chairs were too hard, the silence between them too thick. But Grayson remained. He sat just close enough for her to feel his presence, far enough to let her breathe. Time folded in on itself. The only thing that mattered now was the sound of a door opening. An hour passed, maybe more. Then a nurse appeared. "He's stable," she said gently. "The fever broke. We're keeping him overnight, but he's going to be okay." Ada's breath collapsed out of her like a wave. She leaned back against the wall, hands over her face, relief crashing through her. "Do you want me to call anyone?" Grayson asked quietly. She shook her head. "There's no one left to call." She turned to him, eyes swollen, face blotchy and pale. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did. I didn't know who else to text. I didn't even know if you'd show up." "I didn't know either," he admitted, "until I was already on my way." They both gave small, tired smiles. She leaned forward again, burying her face in her hands. He placed a hand gently on her back. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned and let herself fold into his chest. She didn't speak, didn't apologize, just cried quietly, the kind of crying that comes when the worst is past and the body finally lets go. Grayson held her, steady and silent, as though he'd done it 100 times before. Somewhere in that stillness, in the sterile light and hum of machines beyond the wall, something shifted. Not a rescue, not romance, but connection. Real and unspoken. By morning, the internet had found them. A grainy photo, taken discreetly in the waiting room, showed Grayson holding Ada close, her coat crumpled on the chair beside her, her eyes closed, face pressed against his chest. The caption read, "Tech Mogul's Midnight Rescue. Who is the mystery woman?" The photo spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, gossip bloomed, and speculation ran unchecked. "She's a gold digger. She planned this. That baby isn't his." He's finally moved on. Look at her. Who lets a child go that long without care? Ada read every word. She sat on the motel bed, Elias asleep beside her, the glow of her phone screen painting shadows on the wall. Post after post. Comment after comment. She tried to stop scrolling, but her hands wouldn't obey. When Grayson arrived the next morning with 2 coffees and a bag of groceries, he knew something had changed. She opened the door, but didn't step aside. "I can't do this," she said. Grayson froze. "Ada, I don't want my son growing up in a scandal. I don't want him seeing this one day and wondering if it's true. I don't want him thinking we were a mistake." He placed the coffee down gently. "You haven't done anything wrong." "It doesn't matter," she said, shaking her head. "People don't care. They see a photo and decide who you are." He was quiet for a long time. "Then let me tell them who you really are." "You mean issue a statement? Hire a PR team?" "No," he said. "I mean me. Speaking, no scripts, no edits, the truth." She blinked. "On TV?" He nodded. "You trusted me enough to text me when your son was dying. Now I need you to trust me with this." She looked at Elias, still sleeping, then back at him. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. The studio was quiet. No dramatic lights, no applause, just a chair, a camera, and a single host known for honesty over spectacle. Grayson sat across from her. "I know why I'm here," he said. "Not because I'm famous, not because I'm rich, because a photo went viral." The host didn't interrupt. "I want to talk about something I've never shared publicly," he continued. 4 years ago, I lost my fiancée and my brother in a plane crash. Since then, I've lived like a ghost. One night a week, I sat at the same table, ordered the same meal, across from an empty chair. His voice softened. Then, one night, a young woman walked up to my table. She asked for leftovers, not for herself, for her child. He paused. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just asked. The camera captured his expression, steady, full of something deeper than grief. "And in that moment," he said, "she gave me something I hadn't had in years, a reason to care, a reason to stay." He spoke her name, spoke Elias's name, spoke the truth. "She didn't take anything from me," he said. "She reminded me I still had something left to give." When the interview aired that evening, the reaction was immediate. Stories flooded in, mothers sharing their own struggles, nurses recalling young women like Ada. Donations were made quietly. Letters were sent to shelters. A woman in Kansas started a support fund in Ida's name. Ada said nothing at first. Then, one morning, she knocked on Grayson's office door. He opened it. She stood there, Elias in her arms. "I'm not running," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." He didn't speak. He stepped aside. That day, Grayson didn't just open a door. He opened his life. The next few months unfolded slowly, gently. Grayson rented them a small apartment in a quiet part of the city. Not extravagant, but warm, safe, a place to start over. Ada moved in with 2 bags and a baby carrier. Within a week, the apartment looked like a home. Socks on the radiator, bottles by the sink, laughter in the kitchen. There were no labels, no declarations, just a presence that became a habit, a rhythm, something real. Then, one afternoon, the past came knocking. A hard, fast knock, sharp enough to make Ada freeze. She opened the door carefully. He was taller than she remembered, the father of her son. "I saw the interview," he said. "Looks like you've done well for yourself. What do you want?" "I want to see my son." "No," she said, "you gave that up. You told me to get rid of him. You left. That was then. This is now. You don't know him? I want him now, especially with everything he comes with." Grayson's voice came from behind her. "No, you don't." The man turned. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who stayed," Grayson said. "The one who held him through a fever, fed him, protected him, loved him. You think money makes you his dad?" "No," Grayson said calmly. "Love does." The man stared, but Ada stepped forward. "Leave," she said, "and don't come back." He did. The next morning, Grayson met with his lawyer. "I want to adopt him," he said. It took weeks, paperwork, interviews, meetings. Ida stood by him through every one. When the final documents were signed, Grayson knelt beside Elias, who was playing with blocks. He held out the certificate. "Guess what, buddy? I'm your dad now, forever." Elias didn't understand, but he smiled that same wide, gummy smile, the same one that started it all. A year later, they stood beneath a tree in a quiet city park. No cameras, no press, just a boy in a vest carrying a velvet box. Grayson turned to Ada. "I've had everything," he said, "but none of it mattered. Then I met you. You weren't asking for help. You were just trying to feed your baby. And somehow, you fed me too." He opened the box, a simple gold ring. "Will you marry me?" Ada dropped to her knees and embraced him. "Yes," she whispered. They exchanged vows beneath the branches, Elias tugging at Grayson's pant leg. "Daddy," he chirped. Grayson lifted him. "I love you, son." Ada wrapped her arms around them both. They were a family, not by blood, by choice. And that was more than enough. Subscribe for more stories and don't forget to watch the next video. Share this one with someone who needs to see it.